Carl Jung's most terrifying realization wasn't about insanity, it was about clarity. He discovered a specific group of people who possess a dangerous ability, the power to see what everyone else ignored. And he found that this gift is almost guaranteed to destroy them. In his private files, Jung tracked patients with what he termed differentiated perception. These aren't psychics. They are individuals who naturally decode micro-expressions, smell hidden motives, and perceive the psychological architecture of a room the moment they walk in. They see behind the social mask. They know when you're lying before you even speak. Jung labeled this discovery dangerous for a tragic reason. These people almost always end up isolated, burnt out, and socially exiled. Not because they are broken, but because the cost of seeing the truth is total alienation. Today, we are going to explore Jung's warning about those who see everything, and why this rare trait will either break you or turn you into something the world isn't ready for. To understand this, we have to go back to 1913. Jung was in the middle of his own mental collapse after splitting with Freud when a patient arrived who changed everything. She was the archetype of the rarest personality structure, the pure introverted intuitive. She possessed what Jung called undifferentiated intuitive perception. Put simply, she was a human lie detector. She could enter a crowded room and instantly map out the emotional landscape. Who is faking it? Who is suffering? Who is holding a grudge? She knew. Jung noted a cruel irony. Her superpower was her source of misery. She couldn't handle small talk because the superficiality felt physically painful. She couldn't keep friends because people felt naked and exposed in her presence. She couldn't hold down a job because her inability to ignore the elephant disrupted the polite lies that keep society functioning. Jung realized he wasn't treating a mental illness. He was looking at the side effects of extreme consciousness. It's what happens when perception becomes too sharp for social survival. She would describe people's deepest secrets with terrifying accuracy. Jung would investigate her claims, only to find she was right every single time. This wasn't psychosis. This was a level of awareness that had become a liability, but the rabbit hole went deeper. Jung struggled to explain how she did this, leading him to investigate the concept of participation mystique. It's a state where the barrier between you and the world dissolves. Jung wrote that for these people, the psyche is so finely tuned that it doesn't just receive words, it absorbs the entire unconscious atmosphere of the environment. While modern science, led by Dr. Elaine Aron, categorizes this under the umbrella of highly sensitive persons, the 20%, Jung was pointing to something far more specific and far more intense. Jung pinpointed this phenomenon to a very specific group, the introverted intuitive type. We are talking about roughly 1% of the population. These aren't just emotional people. They are individuals whose brains are wired to perceive unconscious patterns with startling clarity. Jung called this the differentiated intuitive function. While most people process surface-level social cues, this type reads the metadata of the human psyche. They see the depression fueling a forced smile. They smell the desperation hidden under confident body language. They feel the collective shadow, those dark truths that families and friend groups silently agree to ignore. And this is where the danger lies. Jung wrote that the risk isn't the perception itself, but the inevitable isolation it creates. When you clearly see what everyone else is trying to ignore, you cease to be a person and become a mirror, and society cannot bear to look into that mirror. This creates what Jung termed the problem of the superior function. Your greatest strength becomes your heaviest burden, because it exiles you from the comfortable lies of the group. But the real threat is shadow projection. Since these individuals clearly perceive the unconscious garbage others are carrying, they become lightning rods for it. Jung explained that when a person encounters someone who sees their shadow, their unconscious mind has two choices: integrate the darkness or attack the mirror. History shows that people rarely choose integration. Jung documented this cycle repeatedly. The person who observes the problem gets blamed for creating the problem. It's a mechanism of psychological defense. You gently ask someone why they seem troubled, and they explode at you for being negative. You point out an obvious issue, and you are accused of manufacturing drama. As Jung noted in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, everything that irritates us about others is a guide to understanding ourselves. But for most, it is far easier to attack the person reflecting their shadow than to examine what is being reflected. This results in the scapegoat phenomenon, where the most perceptive person in the room becomes the designated villain, not for what they did, but for what they saw. They become the designated villains not because they create chaos, but because they shine a light on the chaos that is already there. Jung observed a brutal truth. The bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself. This is why, if you are one of these people, you don't just feel misunderstood, you feel hunted. You are being targeted by a psychological force that defies rational explanation. But Jung's discovery went even. He realized that this burden of seeing too much doesn't look the same for everyone. He identified 4 distinct archetypes within this rare personality group, each processing the unconscious in a different, often overwhelming way. Type 1, the feeling intuitive. Jung documented patients who combined their intuition with a high sensitivity feeling function. These people don't just analyze the psychological atmosphere, they metabolize it. They absorb the emotions of others so completely that the line between me and them blurs. Jung noted that they live in a state of perpetual emotional contagion, physically carrying the rage and anxiety of everyone around them as if it were their own. Type 2, the thinking intuitive. These are the unconscious strategists. They see the hidden architecture of human behavior and can predict the future with frightening accuracy. They know a relationship is dead months before the breakup. They see a career collapse before the first mistake is made. It isn't magic, it is advanced pattern recognition. Jung wrote that they perceive the logical conclusions of unconscious processes long before reality catches up. Type 3, the sensation intuitive. This type acts as a biological radar. Jung found patients who could detect the physical shadow of a psychological state. They sense illness before symptoms appear. They feel the fatigue of a room before anyone yawns. They register the bodily tension of a lie. As Jung described, these individuals act as living early warning systems for the physical and mental disease brewing in their environment. Type 4, the pure intuitive. This was the rarest and perhaps most tragic category Jung encountered. These individuals possess the raw perception without the auxiliary tools to organize it. The filter is completely removed. They see everything, but struggle to translate it into words or actions. Jung observed that they live in a state of constant flooding, drowning in a sea of unconscious data without a life raft to keep them afloat. Identifying which pattern you fit into is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a survival strategy. Each type demands a different method of integration. But before we can talk about the cure, we must understand the threat. Jung believed this discovery was dangerous for a reason. He saw that seeing the truth without the strength to carry it poses a lethal risk. He categorized this into 3 specific threats. Danger number 1, collective unconscious disruption. Jung wrote that the person who sees too clearly is an existential threat to the tribe. Society relies on collective agreements, essentially, shared illusions that keep the peace. We all agree to ignore certain elephants in the room to keep the group stable. But when you see through those illusions, you become a walking glitch in the system. You don't even have to speak. Your simple presence violates the unspoken contract of denial. You are a destabilizing force just by being authentic. Danger number 2, psychological isolation. Jung described this as the curse of consciousness. When your greatest strength is the source of your greatest pain, you enter a profound state of loneliness. As Jung noted, awareness cannot be shared with those who are asleep. You become an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. It's not just about not having friends. It is about living in a fundamentally different reality than everyone around you. Danger number 3, identity dissolution. This is the most lethal risk. Jung found that people who constantly sponge up the unconscious debris of others eventually lose track of themselves. You become so flooded with external emotions and thoughts that you can no longer tell the difference between your own soul and the environment. Jung called this participation mystique, a state where boundaries melt and you are possessed by the collective mood. It isn't just social exile, it is psychological annihilation. You cease to exist as an individual. Because these dangers are so real, Jung didn't view his solution as mere therapy. He viewed it as a rescue mission. He called it the individuation process, a systematic way to build a firewall between you and the collective unconscious. Phase 1, recognition and differentiation. Jung taught his perceptive patients that survival begins with conscious discrimination. You must learn to identify the exact moment you start absorbing psychic material that isn't yours. Jung wrote that without this ability to sort mine from theirs, individual development is impossible. His prescription for this was simple but difficult: radical solitude. You need time alone not just to relax, but to let the sediment settle. You must step away from the noise to wash off the foreign psychological material and remember what your own voice sounds like. Phase 2, shadow integration. Here's the hard truth Jung discovered. The reason the darkness in others disturbs you so much is often because you haven't made peace with your. The more you deny your own capacity for selfishness, deception, or cruelty, the more you will be triggered when you see it in someone else. Jung famously wrote that everything that irritates us about others is a mirror, but you have to have the courage to look into it. Shadow integration means accepting that you are capable of every behavior you despise in others. You cannot protect yourself from the world's shadow until you have shaken hands with your own. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a whole person. And once you stop running from your own shadow, you unlock Phase 3, conscious participation. This is the mastery level. It involves engaging with the darkness in others without being infected by it. Jung described the individuated person as a bridge, someone who can connect the conscious and unconscious worlds for others without collapsing under the weight. To do this, you must build what Jung called psychological containers. Think of it as handling toxic material with protective gear. You hold their pain, you acknowledge their unconscious trauma, but you never mistake it for your own. You hold the poison, but you don't drink it. Jung knew this was life or death. He believed that superior perception is a fork in the road. It will either transform you into a sage or destroy you completely. To prove it, he analyzed two specific historical figures who took opposite paths. The warning, Friedrich Nietzsche. Jung was fascinated by Nietzsche, a man who saw through the religious and social facades of his time with laser precision. But Jung identified a fatal flaw. Nietzsche used his insight as a sword. He wielded the truth as a weapon against society. Jung noted that Nietzsche never integrated his visions. He was possessed by them. Instead of using his gift to heal, he used it to isolate himself. As Jung wrote, he was consumed by the very things he saw. He didn't just look into the abyss, he let the abyss swallow him whole, leading to his eventual psychotic break and total collapse. The model, Meister Eckhart, on the other hand, Jung pointed to the medieval mystic Meister Eckhart as the ultimate example of success. Like Nietzsche, Eckhart saw spiritual and psychological truths that were invisible to the masses. But Eckhart didn't cut people with the truth. He fed them with it. Jung called this conscious humility. Eckhart understood that his vision was a responsibility, not a sign of superiority. He translated his complex insights into wisdom that nourished people rather than overwhelming them. He didn't demand to be heard. He invited understanding. Jung's own battle. But the most personal proof came from Jung himself. During his confrontation with the unconscious, between 1913 and 1919, the era chronicled in his infamous Red Book, Jung nearly lost his mind. I was menaced by a psychosis, the flood of unconscious information. From both his patients and his own psyche, almost drowned him. He was only saved because he treated himself. He realized that the only way to survive the storm was not to fight it, but to understand it, structure it, and integrate it. Jung's breakthrough was realizing that this curse wasn't a defect, it was an upgrade. He concluded that these overwhelming perceptions were evolutionary. It was consciousness trying to break its own limits. But Jung knew that evolution is lonely. He wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also knew you cannot do it in a vacuum. You need witnesses. You need what he called the few who understand. To survive, Jung identified 3 specific types of allies you must find. Ally type 1, the conscious minority. These are fellow individuated people. Jung wrote that when 2 of these people meet, the recognition is instant. There is no small talk. There is just a sudden, intense click. You don't have to filter yourself. You don't have to explain your intuition. You are safe. These relationships are rare, but finding just one can save your sanity. Ally type 2, the seekers. These are people who may not have your level of perception, but they are actively doing the work. They are in therapy, they are introspective, they are fighting their own dragons. Jung noted that those who have begun to know themselves can bear to be known by others. They won't attack you for seeing their truth because they are already searching for it themselves. Ally type 3, the natural anchors. Jung called these natural containers. These people might not be intuitive wizards, but they are emotionally bulletproof, deeply mature individuals who have weathered life's storms. They can hear a hard truth without crumbling. They offer a stable place for your insights to land. But how do you spot them? Jung developed a mental litmus test to identify safe people. Do they ask genuine questions when you point something out? Do they own their flaws without shame? Do they stay calm when the conversation gets deep? If the answer is yes, they are safe. If they get defensive, you retreat. Jung warned his patients, never show your full hand immediate. He taught a gradual revelation protocol to protect yourself. Drop a crumb. Share a tiny, gentle observation. Watch the reaction. Do they get curious or angry? Assess. If they pull back, you stop. If they lean in, you proceed. Frame it as a gift. Never say, this is how it is. Say, I feel like this might be happening. Jung's goal wasn't to find people who blindly agree with you. It was to find people who treat your perception as a contribution, not a threat, because in the end, your growth isn't just about you. Jung viewed this integration as essential for the survival of the species. As he wrote in The Undiscovered Self, Jung believed that individuals who master this clarity become the engineers of societal evolution. They are the I-culture carriers, the ones who nudge humanity forward, often without anyone realizing it. He outlined 4 distinct stages of this profound transformation. Stage 1, recognition without overwhelm. This is the foundational shift. It's learning to see everything and still breathe. It's the conscious acceptance of your unique wiring. Jung called this the recognition of what one actually is. You stop fighting the perception and start acknowledging it. You realize this isn't a curse, it's your operating system. Stage 2, integration without isolation. This is where you learn to be fully you and still connect with others. Jung termed this social individuation. It means you don't have to retreat from the world to be authentic. Instead, you engage with it more deeply, more consciously. You become a bridge, not an island. Stage 3, service without sacrifice. Here, your perception transforms from a burden into a gift. It's no longer just about seeing, it's about contributing. Jung called this conscious participation, using your unique vision to help others without emptying your own well. He wrote that the true privilege is offering your authentic self in service of the whole. Stage 4, legacy without attachment. This is the pinnacle. It's about impacting collective consciousness without needing applause or recognition. Jung observed that the truly evolved individual works for the future, not for personal recognition in the present. Your integrated perception becomes cultural medicine, a quiet force shaping what comes next. Jung firmly believed that those who integrate this power are vital to our collective survival. They are the ones who see the looming threats that mass consciousness is blind to. As he warned, what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. These perceptive individuals make the unconscious conscious before it erupts destructively into our collective behavior. But the path is treacherous. Jung cautioned about specific traps that can derail this entire process. He documented the most common ways people sabotage their own evolution. The first pitfall, the inflation trap. Jung wrote extensively about psychological inflation, the dangerous moment your ego merges with your power. It's when you stop having superior perception and start being it. He warned in 2 essays on analytical psychology that the danger is that the ego identifies with the archetype, leading to an inflation that cuts the individual off from human relationships. Highly perceptive individuals often fall into what he called the God complex, believing they alone must save everyone from their blindness. This leads to judgment, preaching, and inevitable isolation. Jung noted a cruel irony. The moment one believes oneself to be the bearer of absolute truth, one has fallen into the trap. You aren't mastering the unconscious. You are being possessed by it. The second pitfall, the hermit trap. This is perhaps the most seductive trap. You use your superior perception as an excuse to completely withdraw from society. You convince yourself that others are too asleep or toxic to be worth your time. Jung saw right through this. He called it spiritual superiority masquerading as wisdom. He wrote that true individuation requires friction. It requires engagement. If you run away from the world, you haven't transcended it. You have been defeated by it. The third pitfall, the martyr complex. Jung observed that some intuitive people become addicted to being needed. They define their entire existence by their ability to fix others, losing their own identity in the process. Jung warned that when your perception becomes your only personality, the real you disappears. This isn't growth. It is the sacrifice of personality to role. The fourth pitfall, the relapse. Here's the reality check. Integration isn't a permanent state. Even the masters regress. During trauma, stress or major life changes, your psychological immune system can crash, and you will get flooded again. Jung emphasized that integration is a dynamic process. It's a muscle you have to flex every single day. To stay sane, Jung prescribed a daily regimen. Radical solitude. You need time to detox and separate your emotions from the herds. Selective engagement. Consciously choose who gets access to your gifts. Creative output. You must channel that overwhelming input into art, writing, or work, or it will rot inside you. Jung summed it up beautifully. The integrated person does not achieve perfection, but learns to dance consciously with their own psychological complexity. Why does this trait exist if it is so painful? Jung believed you serve a specific function. In The Undiscovered Self, he argued that the individual is the only carrier of the living spirit. He viewed people like you as consciousness pioneers, You are the advanced scouts. Throughout history, individuals with this burden of sight have always appeared before the collective was ready for them. You are mapping the psychological territory that the rest of humanity will eventually need to explore. You see the future not because you are magic, but because you are awake. And while that wakefulness comes with a heavy price, it is the only thing that moves the human race forward. Jung wrote that what appears in the individual first as psychological insight later manifests in the collective as cultural transformation. Think of yourself as a laboratory. You are the testing ground where nature experiments with new levels of consciousness before rolling them out to the rest of the species. In our modern world, this is more relevant than ever. Jung believed these sensors are the first to detect the cracks in the system. You might be feeling the weight of environmental collapse before the data confirms it. You might sense the spiritual hollowness of modern life, or the dark implications of new technology, while everyone else is distracted by the hype. Your symptoms, your anxiety, your overwhelm are often not just personal pathology, they are the fever of the culture itself, felt through your body. But Jung's most crucial insight was this: do not become a martyr. Evolution doesn't need you to burn yourself out, it needs you to wake up. The goal isn't to sacrifice your individuality for the group, but to develop your individuality so completely that your very existence becomes a gift. This leads to the transcendent function. At the highest level, you learn to hold your power lightly. You see the tragedy, the lies, and the pain, but you no longer feel a compulsive need to fix it or absorb it. You witness it. You become a stable presence in a chaotic world. So, what happened to that patient from 1913? The woman who was drowning in the unconscious secrets of strangers. After 3 years of undergoing Jung's integration process, she didn't lose her ability. She mastered it. She learned to build a wall between her soul and the world. She became a counselor, using her X-ray vision to help people heal instead of letting it hurt her. She found friends who valued her depth instead of fearing it. As Jung noted, she didn't learn to see less. She learned to see wisely. She didn't shut down her perception. She engaged with it consciously. And this brings us to the core of Jung's most dangerous discovery. Some of us are born with a software update that the rest of the world isn't ready for. This advanced perception is a double-edged sword. It will either destroy you through isolation and madness, or it will transform you into the exact kind of human being that our species needs to survive its own future. The choice between destruction and transformation is yours. If you recognize yourself in this description, do not walk this path in isolation. Jung emphasized the need for the few who understand. You have found them here. Subscribe to Losgelöst. Join the community of those who see, and let's explore the unconscious together.